Okay, so the next question. Have you ever been hospitalized or sectioned for your illness? Um, this will actually continue from the first question, have you been diagnosed? Because I voluntarily admitted myself to a hospital, albeit I was under a lot of pressure. Before I get into that, the reason why I mentioned that I can still answer the question, have you been diagnosed, is because I saw a doctor while I was in the hospital for 72 hours, 3 days. He saw me 2 or 3 times. Didn't spend much longer than 20 or 30 minutes talking with me. And later I requested the paperwork because I wanted to, we were having an insurance kind of hiccup, and I just wanted all the paperwork. I wanted to know, what all the details were of when I was in that hospital, just so that I knew them for myself. And when I got a hold of the paperwork, I found out that this doctor who'd seen me 2 or 3 times, I read his notes, and in his opinion, he thought I had borderline personality disorder, which I laugh about it now. It's not funny. But the reason why I laugh at some things is because it's sort of like putting it in perspective how people's subjective perceptions color reality, and they don't really see what's going on in front of them. They compare it to what they've seen before. They compare it to a cluster of symptoms that the doctor thinks that it matches. And I really can't fault him for. Maybe I can, I don't know, but it seems so strange that he would diagnose me as borderline personality disorder. Because I remember reading it, and then on his notes, on the paper, on my patient documentation, and then Googling it and reading about it, and just wondering, how did he come to that conclusion, What made him think that I have borderline personality disorder? And now that I've read about Myers-Briggs type indicator, personality theory, Jungian cognitive function preferences, functional stack, it makes sense why a doctor might think I have that, because anyone who uses extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing pay pretty close attention to what's going on around them. I notice things not as acutely as some people would, because my mind predominantly just looks for major things I see, or trends. It looks for trends, things that have changed since the last time I looked at something. If someone's body language departs from the usual, I notice it. But otherwise, it's really unconscious for me. But what I was trying to say is, anybody who notices tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, posturing, the vibe of a room that you go into, the emotions of the people that you're around, the values that they hold, the political views they hold, religious views, their current physical state or their mood, or all that kind of stuff. If a person cognitively uses extroverted feeling, it's called the chameleon, sort of a propensity to be a chameleon. So how I react to people or behave around them is based a lot on who they are and how they're acting, how they seem to me to be feeling. I can adapt, I can adjust, I can change. So reading about borderline personality disorder as a diagnosis from this doctor, I find it laughable because I don't have that. I could see how when I was anxious and on edge and wanting to know what was expected of me so that I could respond appropriately, that I could seem to have borderline personality disorder. So that's continuing to answer the first question, have you been diagnosed? I have not been diagnosed as bipolar. I have not been diagnosed as schizoaffective. I have not been diagnosed as having schizophrenia. I have not been diagnosed as having, bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Really, the only diagnoses I can really tell you I've officially had from a doctor are that I was depressed or borderline personality disorder, which were both not the right thing. So this might be a disappointing answer for some people. They want, they want to know that I've seen a doctor and been given an official diagnosis. But I haven't trusted any doctors in a long time. And my symptoms are now so different that I would be telling them things that have happened in the past, and what they would be seeing as a current clinical picture is very different from what I've experienced. There was one time that I told my aunt, who's she was trained in psychology and I think psychiatry, and her husband was a therapist too. And one of my brothers had spent the summer in their home with their family and done some sessions with them. So I figured, well, that brother's talked to them about his, whatever he was dealing with. Maybe I could trust my aunt. And I did mention to her, just briefly, when we were on a family trip with her and her kids to see my grandma. I did mention to her. I said, "Is it bad? Am I crazy if I'm hearing what I think are voices?" And she just said, "Are they telling you to hurt yourself?" And I said, no. Sometimes they're just arguing between each other about whether or not I'll believe them. Sometimes they're telling me that other people don't like me or that I've messed up. But they don't tell me to hurt other people or hurt myself. So my aunt pretty much said, well, okay, if it ever gets like that, I need you to promise me you're going to tell somebody. You're going to tell your mom. You're going to, talk to me again. And I said, okay. And she said, so long as the voices aren't telling you to hurt yourself or hurt other people, I think you'll be okay. And I don't know what her opinion is on it. I haven't talked to her in several years or even talked to her about this subject. She was the one person when I was about 14 or 15, I don't remember exactly, that I just briefly mentioned it to her. So without an official diagnosis, I basically put together a picture from my memories, my experiences, because that's what a doctor really does, is they ask you, what are your symptoms, what's been happening, tell me what's going on, and they just let you tell the story and recount what things are worrying you, bothering you, impeding your life. And then they consult the diagnostic manual, and they see if they can't, match it up by phenotype. If you don't know what that means, okay, it's like genotype in science. It's when you look at someone's DNA and you say, oh, this is why they have these symptoms, because there's this gene that's causing them. We can genetically verify that this is why it's happening. The phenotype is an outward expression, an outward manifestation of behavior or symptoms that other people can observe. They don't know what your genes are, but they see that, you're manifesting it outwardly. That's your phenotype. And that's what psychiatry goes off of, is what the patient reports and what people around the patient, report. But typically it's, a private consultation, and they only get the subjective, the patient's side of the story. They only get their patient's memories and perception of what's happening to them, which I think is very, very limiting. It doesn't really tell the whole story. It doesn't generate a really holistic clinical picture that the doctor can adequately diagnose the patient with. So like I've said before, I know myself better than anyone else knows me, and I read objective information, and I come up with a lot of different possibilities, and I compare and contrast them. I challenge little details. I try to remember more things. I try to ask questions to generate more ideas, and so I haven't had an official diagnosis. So when I say that I've had bipolar disorder with psychotic features, and that I still deal with bipolar disorder, but I've recovered a lot, and the severity of my symptoms is really mild now. Obviously, some things have gotten a lot better for me, just my physical health and my mental health. So I voluntarily admitted myself to that hospital, where that doctor wrote in his notes that I might have borderline personality disorder. And it was under pressure because I didn't want to be admitted. The reason why the doctor had approached me and said, I really think you should, is because I had gone to the hospital with my spouse, and in them asking me questions about, why was I at the hospital, I said, well, I swallowed iron. I swallowed a bunch of iron pills, and I did it intentionally. At the time, it was less a suicide attempt, more of a big old F you, because I was really upset about something that had happened in my personal life. I was really, really angry, and just feeling like, oh, there's nothing I can do about this, and I'm so mad, and I'm so sick of this, and I just want this to stop. And I was not really depressed, I was just furious. So I swallowed a bunch of iron, and it was chelated iron, so, which is probably, that's a good thing. It's a safe form to take, but it meant that I had a bowel obstruction from taking so much iron, and that's about as much harm as it did. The reason I was in the hospital with my spouse is because I confessed that I had taken the iron within, I don't know, 36 hours, maybe 48 hours, and then the concern was, well, I need to go to the hospital just to make sure I didn't do any, irreversible harm. And when I told them that, they asked me, of course, do you have a history of suicide attempts? Has this happened before? And I said, well, when I was, a teenager, I used to crush random painkillers, random pills, anything I could get a hold of, and put it in a jar. And I kept it in the garage. And I would slowly add crushed up pills to it. And one day, I was just really distraught and emotionally just in despair, and just so depressed and sad that I went and got it, and I stirred it into a glass of water, I remember, and I drank it, and I was in the bathroom, and I looked myself in the eye in the mirror as I did this. And I remember within 2 or 3 minutes of doing it, regretting it and forcing myself to throw up, which I haven't done very many times in my life. I hate throwing up, but I compelled myself to throw up in the toilet, and I just collapsed crying that I'd ever gotten to that point. So that's why I ended up being pressured into voluntarily admitting myself, because they knew that, oh, this counts as 2 times that she's tried to kill herself. This is serious. And they said if I didn't voluntarily admit myself, they would send MPs, military police, to our home and call my husband's boss, or bosses, since there's a chain of command, they can call several people, and put up a fuss. And she threatened my spouse. And I was already on edge. I was already very anxious, didn't like all the attention that was being paid to me. I'd been through something very stressful, which was trying to kill myself, and then being able to admit it, and then being scared and going to the hospital and all that, and just being pressured like that. And my spouse was not happy that I was letting them get to me, but I did. I let them get to me, and I said, fine, give me the paperwork. And additional pressure was that she said, there's only so many beds, and we need you to cooperate with us and do what we feel is best for your safety, or we will make your life miserable. And I'm like, okay, fine, give me the paperwork, take me. And I didn't find out until the next day, and I even remember thinking it was strange after I was admitted and walking down the hallways that they put me in the wrong ward. And I still don't know why they put me in that ward, if it was because there was a bed shortage, but I was not with people who had, I was not in like the psych ward. The people that I was around had drug issues, addiction issues. Some of them had been there multiple times because they couldn't stop using. And I met, some nice people, some friendly people, just well-meaning human people, and I can remember them. I can't remember their names, but I remember their faces. I remember some of the conversations we had. And it was a stressful time for me, but it gave me insight, even though I wasn't in the psych ward. And even that made me feel uncomfortable and paranoid and like, why isn't anyone explaining to me why this happened? Because I didn't have a drug abuse problem at that time in my life. The only substance I was using was when we'd go out to eat dinner and I'd have some alcohol, which I can't tolerate. I just can't. My body I get really sick. It doesn't matter whether it's a small amount, medium amount, large amount. I just can't physically tolerate alcohol. But there was a year in my life when when we'd go out to eat, I'd get a mixed drink. Just one. And we didn't eat out more than once or twice a week. So I just remember thinking, why am I here? Why did they put me in this ward? And I hoped it was because of the bed shortage, that they were just trying to get me into a place that had, a vacancy, an available space. Like, wow, they really wanted to get me into the hospital so bad that they put me in the wrong place. So yes, the answer is yes, I voluntarily admitted myself. Yes, okay, so that's enough for this video. We should probably make another video for question number 3.